If your PTSD still isn't getting better despite therapy, medication, or years of trying to heal, then there may be hidden reasons which are keeping your nervous system still stuck in survival mode. And some of these are so overlooked that even experienced therapists can miss them. As both a psychotherapist and as someone who's recovered from PTSD personally, I want to walk you through 5 hidden reasons I see that most often keep people stuck. And the 4th one surprises a lot of people, but the first reason is one of the most important and could keep people stuck for years. Reason number 1. Now this first reason is super important. So a lot of people think that treating trauma just involves talking about the trauma. And while this can be true, there are in fact a number of trauma therapies which can take different approaches. And guess what? Not all of them are equal. In fact, some of them run the risk of making you feel even worse. Now there is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a talk therapy, but there's also eye movement desensitization reprocessing, also known as EMDR, the rewind technique from Givens Psychotherapy, and internal family systems therapy, IFS, which don't necessarily involve the need to talk. Now, from my experience and the research out there, they are all capable of treating trauma. When my PTSD was pretty bad, and I mean bad, like I was having regular panic attacks, and I was nearly admitted to a psychiatric ward. For me, I found that EMDR was the modality that moved the needle the most. However, I've heard from my clients as well as my viewers, for some, that EMDR left them feeling more destabilized. Likewise, talking-based approaches to trauma has also been super activating for some of my clients, or so they've told me. So the truth is, not all therapies are right for everyone, just like some medications or diets are not right for everyone. We are all unique human beings, and while there are similarities with our brains, there are also physical and mental differences. As we've seen, for example, people with neurodivergent brains and neurotypical brains. So reason number 1 is that the trauma treatment might be wrong for your brain or your psyche. Now, of course, do discuss with your doctor or therapist first before changing or starting new trauma treatments. If you are interested in nonverbal trauma healing, check out the link in the comments and description below, where I link to some self-administered trauma healing such as through self-EMDR and self-rewind. But this next reason might be even more unexpected and crucial for why your PTSD isn't getting better. Reason number 2. If I asked you, what do you think is the most important factor in helping someone in therapy to recover from trauma, what do you think it would be? Now, I suspect most of you probably said something like the right psychological techniques. But the truth is that actually, when it comes to clinical outcomes, research suggests that one of the most important factors in effective therapy is in fact the therapeutic relationship between the therapist and the client. Researchers estimate it is in fact around 30% responsible for therapeutic outcomes, while technique is only 15% responsible. The truth is that any kind of serious healing is unlikely to be possible unless you and your therapist have a really good relationship. And can I be really honest about my profession for a moment? While there are some really good therapists, there are also some who just aren't that warm, human, or compassionate enough. Like, they've got the piece of paper which qualifies them to practice in theory, but they're lacking what I would call the therapeutic personality. My clinical supervisor, in fact, says that it isn't just a case of what skills are attached to the person, but what person is attached to the skills. Is there a person attached to the skills? Effective therapy is not all about psychological techniques, but it's also about warmth and connection and having the right therapist for the right client. So something else to watch out for is that some therapists might remind you too much of someone from your past, which is known as transference. And while that can provide an opportunity for healing, if there is too much transference, it could actually interfere with therapy, as researchers found. For example, I know one guy who just doesn't seem to get on well with female therapists, and part of that has to do with the abuse I think that they suffered from their mother. And likewise, I've known some people who are very thick-skinned, no-nonsense, who just felt really patronized and mollycoddled by their therapist, being really indirect and too soft. And what they probably needed was a therapist who was just direct and straightforward and not overly empathetic. So reason number 2 is that your therapist is not the right person for you. But this next reason might be overlooked by far too many people. Reason number 3. Now this reason might come as a surprise, but I think it's really important. Something I discovered on my PTSD healing journey was that whenever I went to a 12-step recovery meeting, I'd always feel a bit calmer and more grounded. And likewise, I always noticed that when I had a period where I isolated and didn't spend much time connecting with other people, I started to have PTSD flare-ups. So out of nowhere, I was starting to experience intense anxiety, hypervigilance, and even some paranoia. I felt so awful because I thought I was making progress with my PTSD and therapy, and to go through that again made me feel like I'd made 3 steps forward and then taken 2 steps back. But then it dawned on me, I am a social being missing fundamental human needs, community and connection. And as per the human Givens model of psychotherapy, human beings can become mentally unwell when they don't get their needs met adequately and in balance. Various studies suggest that isolation is associated with worse mental health, and there may be a bit of a bi-directional relationship, i.e. isolation can make mental health worse, and likewise, worse mental health can make people isolate. As soon as I started socializing properly again, playing volleyball with others, I noticed my anxiety began to subside, and so too did the hypervigilance and paranoia. And likewise, when I did go through the worst time of my PTSD, I noticed that my mental health improved when I went back home to stay with my mum. The truth is that we are social beings. We need other people. We need community, connection, and a tribe. As the psychologist and co-founder of Human Givens Psychotherapy, Joe Griffin says, sanity is a group activity. We need others to help stabilize our model of reality. Certainly, when we can have long cuddles and hugs, we can actually get a hit of oxytocin, a bonding hormone, which can help us to feel soothed and calmed. So reason number 3 is you might be spending too much time alone. So try joining a community, a sports club, group exercise, maybe a 12-step recovery program specializing in trauma like adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. And don't forget, you can also join my free peer support group on Discord if you want some connection. Check the link in the comments and the description below. So this next reason is a hidden one, and a lot of people can miss this one. Reason number 4. Now I want to tell you a brief story about a woman called Jenny. Jenny was a busy, hard-working mother, juggling the demands of motherhood and a busy career in law. And just like any other Monday, Jenny was rushing to get her kids to school on time. That day, there were roadworks causing Jenny to be even more delayed than normal in taking her youngest son, Matthew, to school. Jenny could feel her blood pressure rising as she sat in the car, still feeling stressed from the night before, having argued with her husband around their struggling finances. And by the time she got to work, she already had 3 emails and 4 text messages from her boss, who'd been asking her if she had completed the report from last week. After an intense day of rushing to meet both her bosses and the client's deadlines, Jenny looked at the clock and suddenly realized it was almost 5 o'clock and she was running late to pick up Matthew. And if she was late again, she would have to pay a penalty or Matthew would have to be removed from the school. She raced to pick Matthew up, her heart pounding, her palms sweating. And as she drove Matthew home, she suddenly remembered that she'd forgotten to buy her youngest autistic son his favorite brand of ketchup, and that there would be tantrums and tears if she did not get that for him. And today she just didn't have the capacity to face that. So she raced to the supermarket only to find they were all sold out of ketchup. And suddenly Jenny began to have a massive panic attack, and worried about what others might think, she quickly ran out of the store to her car and began to sob. Now, this is what my clinical supervisor would call a slow panic attack. And this is where a person's background stress is just way too high, often the result of too many background stresses. And what happens is our brain's ability to tolerate other stresses is diminished, a bit like a cup of water that was already full and just cannot contain any more water. Now, those additional stresses could also be triggers that remind you of trauma, so sights, sounds, smells, or specific words. And if your brain is in this chronic state of high stress, it's possible that the brain will just not be able to contain the trigger, and thus you're much more likely to have a panic attack in a state of high stress. So reason number 4 is that your background stress level is too high. You might need a holiday, a massage, more time off work. Maybe you need more help at home or more help at your job. Perhaps you need someone to help you just sort your life out and sort your finances out. Now, this last reason is one that many therapists and clients miss. Reason number 5. Now, this last reason is perhaps one of the hardest truths to accept. And this is something I think both society and sometimes even therapists can miss. We can end up asking, why aren't you healing? Without looking at what's currently going on in a person's life. For example, maybe you're still in an abusive relationship. Maybe you're still living with emotionally abusive parents or people. Maybe you're still being bullied at work. Maybe you're in financial chaos, living in poverty, trapped in addiction, experiencing discrimination. The truth is that the nervous system is not stupid. If your brain detects ongoing danger, stress, humiliation, rejection, or instability, it will continue activating survival responses like hypervigilance, anxiety, emotional numbing, panic attacks, irritability, or dissociation, because from the brain's perspective, those responses make sense. They are trying to protect you. And this is one reason why people with PTSD often struggle to just calm down. If somebody grew up in an unsafe environment and then continues recreating unsafe dynamics in adulthood, perhaps through relationships, work, environments, or living situations, the nervous system never fully gets the message that the war is over. Healing can be incredibly difficult when your mind and body are still fighting to survive. Now, this does not mean you're doomed if your circumstances are difficult, but it may mean that healing is not just about processing your memories in therapy. Healing might also involve making very real changes in your environment and your life. So setting boundaries, leaving abusive relationships, reducing chaos, building financial stability, finding safer people, changing jobs, or creating a life where your nervous system can finally begin to just exhale a bit and relax. Because sometimes the problem is not that your brain is damaged or broken. Sometimes you are just simply a normal person having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. So reason number 5 is that the trauma may not actually be over. Now, I'm curious, are there any other reasons I may have missed? If so, let me know in the comments below. And please do smash that like and subscribe button if this video has helped you. It really helps my channel. Now, did you know that there are some solid, scientifically backed reasons why you should stop talking about your trauma? Click this video here to learn more about that. And remember, this video is not a replacement for medical or psychiatric diagnosis, treatment, or advice.